want to join Linda in welcoming everyone here today to celebrate the life of our dear friend and colleague. Diane was born in 1935, and she died this past August 1st. We chose today for the celebration because it would have been Diane's 76th birthday. While these numbers mark a person's life, there's an old wisdom that says what truly matters is the dash between the numbers, between one's years here on earth. Because the dash is a symbol of how one lived, the lives the person touched, and the difference a person has made. These are important aspects of the dash and the life well lived. We know that Diane touched the lives of those of you who are here today and so many others. There are a few people who are listed on the program to speak, and there will also be an opportunity for anyone else to make comments to help us fill in the dash of Diane's life. During that part of the program, we asked you to come up to the podium and use the mic because we are trying to record the comments. And after the closing comments, there will be a short slideshow. Please be sure to sign the guest book before you leave. And we're going to start with a few comments from Diane's family. I will read the first, which is from her sister, Brenda. I would like to thank everybody for being here today to celebrate the life of Diane Cabot. I'm very sorry. Oh, okay. I'm very sorry that I cannot be with you due to a long-term prior commitment. If I had one word to describe my sister Diane, it would be kind. She had a way of showing empathy and consideration to all she came in contact with. To know Diane was to love her. Diane had the ability to laugh and to bring happiness to others. She had a joyous sense of humor that we all grew to love. Whether it was SpongeBob, crazy hats, or decorating her walker, she laughed easily, often, and hard. Diane was a devoted mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother to Matthew, Jimmy, and Lori, Patsy, Jacob, Aaron, and most recently, Caitlin. Diane was a wonderful aunt to my children and grandchildren, and they loved her very much. She was a great sister-in-law to my husband, Erwin, and she was a very special sister to me. When my parents were elderly, Diane drove from Baltimore to Jersey City every weekend. She was a constant companion to our mom and dad, who needed special care in their later years. She treated them with love and brought much joy to their lives. She enjoyed her work with the Mental Health Association and had a forever young spirit because of the energy around her. Her friends and co-workers were her extended family. Linda was a very special friend who was caring, concerned, loving, and supportive. Diane was blessed to have a friend like me in her life. She was a true friend in every sense of the word, more like a sister. They were side by side through life's ups and downs. Her visit to the East Coast in June was a labor of love. How lucky we were that all of her friends and family were able to spend precious time with her. My family especially enjoyed being with her. She was a trooper as we kept her busy day and night. She was ready to go on a moment's notice. We are all thankful to have spent that valuable time with her. My sister Suzanne was able to spend time with her in Las Vegas and is grateful for that time together. I would speak to Diane every day, sometimes more than once. I miss these calls very much. I lost my dear Diane on August 1st, which is my birthday. That day brought me the special gift that Diane no longer had to suffer and was at peace. With much love, Brenda.
This is a letter from Diane's older sister, Suzanne. Just a few months ago, 3 to be exact, I spent 5 days with Diane. Diane and I talked on the phone often, perhaps once or twice a week. Sister stuff, books to read, things to buy at Trader Joe's, how long to cook rhubarb, how much sugar to add, grandchildren, children, movies to see, etc. It was the end of May, just before her trip east. She looked forward to her trip, a little apprehensive about her mobility, but definitely excited. We had a lot of time for catching up. Lots of family talk, delving back to our childhood, exploring the different paths we have each taken, East Coast, West Coast experiences, no big questions, no big answers. It was a reflective time for us both. It was different than other visits, more mellow. Maybe we were aware of our ages, she almost 76, me almost 79. Diane wanted to see Water for Elephants, which we had both read and enjoyed. We did that. I wanted to go to a show. She chose Blue Man Group. We went out to buffet dinners with Laurie and Jimmy. We had a good time. We talked about the next time and decided she would come to Portola Valley next, but definitely soon. It's a short 3 months since our visit. So much can happen in such a short time. Knowing a person for 76 years is powerful stuff. I look forward to our next visit. I miss her.
This last letter is from Jim and his wife, Lori. The Cabot family would like to thank each and every one of you for the joy you have given Diane. The stories she has shared with us over the years, from the parties, outings, office pranks, and inside jokes that you shared with her were things we know she cherished. Her laughter over these can still be heard today when we see the smile in the many photos we now have of her sharing the memories with you. It was great to have someone around who found humor in almost everything that happened and made you see that life in general doesn't have to be taken so seriously. Her laughter was hearty, her smile was warming, her touch was loving. She was such a joy to be around. We don't know the full story behind the rubber chickens, but whoever started that with her, thank you. She loved them. Thank you for giving and sharing her Oscar moments with her. We know she looked forward to the movies, attending the parties, dressing up, and sharing those times with her friends. And although we know there were few select friends she was closer to than others, probably only because she saw them on a more daily basis, we know that each of you had a special place in her heart. As we all know, Diane was an exceptional woman and a mother who will be deeply missed forever. Thank you again for being part of her life. Before we start with the people who are on the program, I want to acknowledge a couple of elected officials who are here. I believe Delegate Sandy Rosenberg is here. Thank you, Sandy. And the Secretary of the Department of Disabilities, Kathy Raggio. If there's anyone else I missed, I apologize, and if you'll raise your hand, we'll certainly acknowledge you. We weren't going to do any introduction, so if those of you who are listed in the program would just come up and start, we'll get the show on the road. You'd also tell us how you know Diane.
I'm going to hold one. I'm Susan Lenz, and I'm now Susan Boyd. Bob and I have been married for all the ever.
Let's see, when I read the well-written obituary, I guess a couple weeks ago, two sentences really kind of spoke to me, and so I want to quote from that. In 1979, she founded and became the first director of the Prince George's County Hotline, a program that remains in existence today under the umbrella of the Community Crisis Service. Her example at Hotline inspired many young people to begin their careers in mental health. Well, I'm proud to be one of those many young people whom she's inspired to have a career in mental health. I don't know about that, but thanks. My wife, and I'll be speaking with my wife. First of all, we met actually at Hotline many years ago. And so we're honored to be here today. And also, my stepson, Scott Lenz, is also here. And we managed to, despite the best efforts of the hurricane, we were able to get here. quite a journey. So we first met Diane in 1971, and I believe I was in either the second or the third original training group. Now, back then, it was a really unique concept in mental health. Imagine that, young people actually helping other young people. So, I mean, today, we kind of take that for granted, but back then, as it is today, that was a brilliant concept. To say that being a part of the Hotline experience positively changed my life, I think is the understatement of the year for me. All these years later, I've never experienced an experience like that. And I think it's an experience that people like that, if you have that in your life, you only have it once, and that's if you're very, very lucky. What I remember, as I look back now about Diane, was I remember her tireless, endless support. I remember her wonderful, wonderful nurturing. And she nurtured all of us. And I remembered her consensus leadership style. She had this just wonderful capacity to allow everybody to have their say.
And say.
Say. For me personally, what she engendered in me was two principles that have served me very, very well in my life. The first is, she told me that I was special. Just me. No. And that I could do anything in my life. Anything. So it was like getting a dose of confidence every single time I went to work or a Hotline event, which are many different types of events. The second thing was that I learned this principle that by helping other people, I could help myself. And again, it was a pivotal concept in my life. So based largely in part by her influence, I decided to become a clinical psychologist. And the journey at times was a difficult one. But whenever the attainment of that goal was a problem, I could just rely on the wonderful supportive foundation that Diane provided. So I really want to thank her for that. To this day, 40 years later, I am fortunate to say that I do have sessions with patients where at times I feel like I get more out of it than they do. So, I want to end on this note. There's a saying that I've been fond of quoting lately. I don't know where I picked it up, but it goes like this. When you drink from the well, provide gratitude to those who dug it. It's my honor to be here today and to express my gratitude to Diane and to thank her for providing direction in our lives and ability to focus our lives and to quench our thirst.
I can't really add anything to that except to say shalom.
Susan, I thought you were at least going to talk about the board meeting when we had test votes until 1 in the morning before we took the real vote.
We try to live that down.
Hi, I'm June, and I am really grateful that I was part of Diane's Dash. I just heard that recently about being the Dash being what you do with your life. I just love it, and I am so grateful that I was. I met Diane, I don't know exactly when I met her. I met her about 10 years ago, I think. But I feel like I know some of you because I heard a lot about you. You probably all feel like you know a little bit about me too, some of you, because I know that my name was thrown around a little bit. And I am really grateful for that. Diane and I had a really, really special bond. It was one of those relationships that as soon as we met, it was like we've known each other all of our lives. We had a really special bond. We were able to really talk to each other on a really deep level. We shared lots and lots of experiences together. And when she was here in Baltimore, we did things together, and it was just always, she could make you laugh, like you all know that. She could make you laugh, and she could make you cry. And around all of those emotions. When she moved to Vegas, that was like a loss for me. Like she's going to be far away, and I'm not going to get to see her on a regular basis anymore. However, we did communicate regularly on the phone, and in May, I had the wonderful opportunity to go visit with her. It was, I believe it was a plan, a divine plan that had me sent to Diane. My brother and sister-in-law go to Vegas every May. And so back around last Christmas, I said to them, how about if I tag along with you guys when we go to Vegas, and I get to go visit my friend Diane. So I'm really grateful that I did that, because I have no regrets now that I didn't get to see her. And we spent 3 great days together. She came to the hotel with me and spent the time with me. We went to see a couple shows. She got to meet my sister-in-law and brother. They got to meet her, and what a wonderful person she was. Most especially, though, was we went to dinner at the Chart House, at the Golden Nugget. Now, neither of us knew that that place was there until we got in there, and she saw the sign, and she said, that's where I want to go. There's a Chart House in Baltimore. So we found it. Diane was her walker at the time. It was a little bit of a challenge for her, but she was bound and determined, as well you all know about Diane when she found her. And we found it. It was the most special dinner. We had a really special dinner. And so I really didn't know that would be my last dinner with her, but I'm really grateful for that. The night before her surgery, she called me to tell me that this was going to happen. And she was a very frightened lady that night, and it was very sad. She was very frightened about not being here in Maryland. The good doctors, you know. And I understood that, because if you've been there, you know, not maybe been where she is, but at least doctors, I could understand that. So we had this really nice conversation. I tried to comfort her from thousands of miles away. And when we hung up, before we hung up, she said, Joan, I love you, and I'm so happy you've been in my life. And when I hung up the phone, I cried, and I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to talk to her again. So I'm really grateful for that time. I'm great that I'm just, you know, she's not here with us physically, but she's here in spirit. She's here with spirit. When Mike went out, I said, she said enough. She said enough. So I am, she said I was blessed to be in her life. I'm blessed that she's in my life. And I really am very appreciative of Dee kept me posted while she was very ill, and I thank you for that. And thank you all for being here, and thank you for allowing me to be here.
Hi, I'm Yvonne Barrett, and I met Diane about 25 years ago at the Government Affairs Committee of Metro Baltimore at her house. And I don't normally read things, but seeing you all here makes this kind of real for me. I find that difficult. So bear with me if you will, please. When I think of my Diane, my friend, my buddy, my mentor, and my confidant, the word passion comes to mind. When I first met Diane in 1986, I knew she would be a special force in my life. I knew it instantly, and she was. Diane lived life passionately, with intense conviction and fervor for what she needed to do to make sure that people she cared about were well served and were given the best shot at the best life they could have. And she did this for everyone, little children, teenagers, adults, and for those of us who are learning all too quickly what the word senior means. And especially she did this for people whom others disregard. She fervently, with deep interest, wanted to know who people were, and she celebrated each life's progress as we celebrate her life here today. Diane educated so many of us on what to do to be brave and solid advocates, and we'll never forget her lessons. She was outspoken when conversation veered from the real. And she tried to give everyone she met the benefit of the doubt, but I must say, when you affirmed that you were doubtful, look out. The impact of her life's work gives homage to the person that she was and will continue for years to come. Diane also passionately loved her family. Nothing was too big or too small for her to tackle for them. I recall when Patsy was pregnant with Aaron, Diane said, "I really wonder about this grandmother business. I'm not really a grandmother type." I said, "Well, you just be a different kind of grandmother. It's okay." And she was. She and Aaron forged a bond that was full of love and playfulness and heart-to-heart talks and just plain old goodness. What a relationship those two had. Diane also loved her friends, truly and with great heart, and gave back so much to all of us. Conversation and time spent with her was always full of laughs and also food for thought. She made me giggle when she would emphatically say, for instance, and I know you all can hear, "That new restaurant I went to last night was really great." "Oh, really, Diane?" I would say. "I heard it wasn't so good." She'd say, "Oh, it was terrible." She'd do that all the time. You'd say, "How are you?" She'd say, "I'm great." And you'd say, "Really? You're feeling good?" "Oh, I feel terrible." She approached everything wholeheartedly and with a sense of humor. One night, she and I went to a fundraiser for a legislator. And we were walking into the door of this crowded place, and I noticed she had a big hole in the back of her skirt. And I said, "Diane, you have a big hole in the back of your skirt." She said, "That's okay, just stay behind me." So I did. But you know, for all of you who know Diane, she'd be flipping around, and I'd be behind her trying to keep up, you know, looking like a total fool because nobody knew me, they all knew Diane, and I was just kind of the queen's lackey or something. But we giggled all the time through this whole thing. One time Diane got me to go on a show for seniors to talk about depression. She would get me to do all kinds of stuff. She said to me, she forewarned me, "Whatever you do, don't look at the toupee that the host has." It's a terrible toupee. Well, of course, the whole time I was like this. So, you know, it was like she told you something and you had to do the opposite because you just sort of wanted to tickle her a little bit with stuff. It was absolutely impossible to say no to Diane. No use fighting it, and we all just went for the glorious ride that was having Diane in your life. With all of her energy and vitality, one might think that Diane's life coasted along, but this was not so. She had lots of challenges and heartaches and experiences that made her very sad. In many ways, Diane was a very private person, and she let each of us have a different peek. And she was very clear about the limits on what we could know. At the same time, her heart was always generous. She gave to all of us the most precious gifts of passion, strength, support, courage, and fun. It's really hard to think that her physical presence is no longer around. I keep pretending she's in Vegas. we know she's still with us and she lives in our hearts and our spirits, and I am, as all of you are, immensely grateful that Diane Cabot was in my life. We celebrate her, we honor her, and most importantly, I think we all love and appreciate her. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Herb Cromwell, Director of the Community Behavioral Health Association of Maryland. I've known Diane from way back. I think it was about 1980. I started at the Mental Health Association of Maryland in October of 1977. And I think Diane became the director of the Metropolitan Baltimore Mental Health Association. Is it 1980, 81? Soon around that time. So I go way back with many good memories. And I'm really here to second that emotion that Yvonne articulated. So many things I've learned from Diane. I'm really here today to just give public thanks to Diane for all the things she taught me. The first is the importance of passionate advocacy. She really did believe that each one of us individually could make a difference. She truly did, and in fact, she did time after time, as have many of us, thanks to Diane's lessons. She also was committed to dedicating that advocacy to people who were more disenfranchised than others. We used to have arguments, maybe you still do in the Mental Health Association, about whether we're the Mental Health Association to save the world, everybody's mental health, or are we advocates for people with mental illnesses and people who have particular challenges that society hasn't responded appropriately to it. She and I were of the same mind that the first, at least, priority role of the Mental Health Association was the latter, to be an advocate for folks that needed the advocacy the most. And by gum, I think the Mental Health Association, following Diane's example and her leadership, has been a pretty good kick-ass advocate for a while. She was also, I think, way ahead of her time in so many things that we now sort of take as sort of core values. I mean, because of her advocacy for people who may not have had the advocacy that they needed, she was a pioneer in recognizing that advocacy needed to be dedicated to children. She was at the forefront of things like the development of advocacy for children and youth, with Jane Walker. Jane's here, I don't know if she's going to talk. I mean, Diane was right there in saying, hey, kids' mental health matters. And secondly, that families matter. Families, not only have kids with mental and emotional disabilities, but Diane was, I know she was helpful in starting the whole NAMI movement. She was, I know, a partner in developing NAMI in Metropolitan Baltimore. As a family member herself, she did. She was an incredible pioneer. We also thank Diane, I thank her for her appreciation of personal autonomy. I think that was reflected in her commitment to civil rights. And I think Mike will probably talk about this to great length, but a lot of the victories we had back then centered around the rights of people to live life the way everybody else does. One of the most significant victories, and Diane was a leader in that movement along with Mike, was House Bill 150 in 1983. The first, one of the first, if not the first, Bill of Rights for folks in psychiatric hospitals. I still have a picture of the bill signing with Harry Hughes and Ben Cardin, was Speaker of the House, I think. Diane was there with a whole bunch of us. It was a notable event, I think, in advocacy, and Diane was in the middle of it and really was the leader of it. Of course, that personal autonomy also translated into her personal life. You know, any of you ever tried to get Diane to do something or go somewhere she didn't want to go to, forget it. I ain't doing it, I'm not going, go ahead, have a good time, I loved her for that. She also, and Yvonne alluded to this, had, I think, a pretty unique ability to combine serious work with serious fun. The meetings we'd go to, the public policy meetings at her house, always had food. All the Mental Health Association events always had a festive air to them, serious business, but we're also going to have fun. Liquor was served. And I remember, as several of you alluded to, I remember her as much for her laughter as for her impassioned public policy arguments, both of which could really get your attention. And the last thing I just want to thank Diane for is the role she had in my meeting Linda, my wife, who's over here. It was a dark and stormy night, October 15, 1985. It was the occasion of B. Rogers' retirement from being executive director of the Mental Health Association of Prince George's County. B was taking some highfalutin government jobs, I remember. They had this going away thing at the Officers Club at Andrews, and it was raining. And I said, I know I have to go to this, but I was whining. And Diane said, A, you're going, and B, I'll drive. So she drove me, we went, had a great time, and I met Linda, and one thing led to another. We were in the bar talking, Diane had to drag me out of the bar, because she said, I'm going home, you're coming with me. But if it wasn't for Diane, she introduced us, or you introduced us. That night obviously was a life changer, thanks to Diane. So I have a lot to be thankful for her. Let me just end by just saying that, I'm sure all of us have some memories of sort of particular things that we will carry with us forever. One of the things I remember is early in her tenure as executive director, when you're executive director with boards, volunteers are the salt of the earth, and none of us would be able to do anything without volunteers. But there could be some challenging volunteers. And I remember one of her first board presidents had this thing. He had to have a particular kind of soda in the refrigerator at all times. It was just the most bizarre thing. And I thought she was going to go over the wall within the first month of her tenure with that particular president. But she hung in there, being the resilient person that she was. And thank God she did. I remember being in the basement of 323 East 25th Street, stuffing envelopes, I'm sure that's what we were doing, when the Challenger disaster happened. Emily said she was there too. I remember the god-awful circus. We had Mental Health Association, the circus. We had this brilliant idea we were going to make money. We had this person, this fundraiser, we listened to them. They said, we're going to bring this circus into town. We had this almost like hurricane event, and they got bogged down in the mud in Cumberland. Lou will never forgive me for that. And the circus fundraiser became a disastrous circus fund loser. But not soon after, we laughed about it to this day. So there are many, many other things, but I'll turn the mic over. But I just wanted to publicly thank Diane for all that she taught me and for all the wonderful, wonderful memories.
Hi, I'm Mike Finkel. I'm with Honor Maryland. We're the statewide mental health consumer education advocacy organization. And I say that because I probably wouldn't be with Honor Maryland if it wasn't for Diane Cabot. And I met Diane in 1981 down in Annapolis, probably with Herb and others. I was working on some patients' rights stuff with Terry Board. Terry probably remembers it better than I do because she was in. Dan Plattman gave her an assignment to develop a Bill of Rights for people in hospitals that had something to do with the Mental Health Systems Act from the Carter era. Anyway, I wasn't really working with On Her Own back then. I was involved in mental health advocacy. But I met Diane, but I really got to know Diane in 1982. And that's when, well, let me back up. Peg Sullivan was the original founder of On Her Own in Baltimore. And they started having meetings in 1981. And it was through Diane Cabot that Peg was encouraged to start On Her Own. Peg met Diane and was involved with the Mental Health Association Metro Baltimore. And Peg started having meetings of mental health consumers in Catonsville in the fall of '81. In '82, they incorporated On Her Own as an official corporation, got some money from mental hygiene. It was federal money from the Community Support Program that was passed through the Mental Hygiene Administration to give On Her Own some funds to hold the first ever statewide consumer conference. And that's really when I got to know Diane, because Peg invited me to be on the steering committee in sort of the late 1981, early 1982, to put on the first statewide mental health consumer conference in Maryland. And that's when I really got to know Diane and what a wonderful person she was and how funny she is and what passion she had. And sure enough, in June of 1982, we held the first statewide mental health consumer conference in Maryland. and we had over 200 people come. And that was really the start of the consumer recovery and advocacy movement here in Maryland. And I got to really know Diane, become a friend with her, and she invited me at one point later on to be on the board of the Mental Health Association of Metropolitan Baltimore. I was on the board for 6 years, and I really enjoyed my tenure with Diane. I met Herb, and we did a lot of great things. Herb mentioned the House Bill 150, the Patients' Rights Bill, and that was the first time in Maryland that a comprehensive Bill of Rights was passed. And we owe a lot to Diane and to Herb and the Mental Health Association for all their advocacy work and sort of establishing a really great Bill of Rights for people with psychiatric disabilities in both private and state psychiatric hospitals. And you know, out of that conference came the recommendation to start an On Our Own group. And so Mental Hygiene was very supportive and gave On Our Own of Baltimore some funds to start the first drop-in center, which opened in June of '83. And we've been going strong ever since. We have Care Run Wellness and Recovery advocacy groups all throughout the state of Maryland. And if it wasn't for Diane, who knows whether we would be where we are today. I also remember the wonderful Government Affairs Committee meetings at Diane's house. And Emily and I were talking about that, and Morty's Chicken, and having a good time. Janet Edelman was there, and lots of Yvonne was there, and Dan Storch would come. We'd have a great time and sit around and talk about advocacy, and then afterwards we just you know, tell jokes and just relax. I was very fortunate that Diane and I became very good friends. We didn't live very far apart. Diane would invite me to her house for Thanksgiving dinners and for other events. We celebrated each other's birthdays. We had a lot of fun, and we did a lot of interesting things, like we took a hot air balloon ride once. It was fun. But you know, Diane had a weird sense of humor, and we all loved that. For example, a bunch of us were out to dinner one night at the Belvedere, and there was a wedding going on. And Diane said, "Let's crash the wedding." Fair enough, she went up to the bride and groom. They were outside taking pictures, and she said, "Can we get in the wedding picture?" And the bride said, "Who the hell are you?" So the answer is no. I have pictures of that night, except the bride and groom weren't there. It was a lot of fun. And Herb mentioned, I must applaud you, Herb, because you mentioned that Diane said she would drive. And if you ever driven with Diane, you've taken your own life in your hand. Diane always rode the brake. If you ever drove with Diane, the car would always go So knowing Diane was quite exciting. She was, again, she was the consummate advocate. She was articulate, passionate, empathetic, a true tour de force to deal with. She also a great friend of mine, and I will truly, truly miss her.
Hello, everybody. My name is T. Arthur. I'm president of the Mental Health Association of Maryland Board, but that's not why I agreed to do this. When you know, she called me and said, "Well, do you want to make some remarks?" I said, "Boy, you know, there's so many people that know Diane much longer than I have, and I don't want to take the time." And then I had to think about it, because I had to think about personally for me. So I'm going to talk to you from another point, which is the Anti-Stigma Project. Okay. And tell you some things that you may or may not know. But in 1993, there was research out of New York that said people who were receiving mental health services felt more stigmatized within the system than out of the system. Let me say that again. The people receiving mental health services felt more stigmatized by behaviors and attitudes in the system than outside of the system. And so, of course, all of you know that Maryland is a very progressive state, and so they were not going to let this just go by. So I got called to a meeting with a guy named John Allen, and he said, we'd like you guys to chair a committee to look at this issue. And then once you look at this issue, help develop some strategies that might address this issue. And they had selected, as I call them, the 25 chosen people. You know, this is a committee of 25 consumers, advocates, providers, administrators, all of this stuff. And of course, this is a great group. I mean, these are progressive people, some of them are nationally known, some of them were at least locally known. I mean, just all of these people. Of course, Diane was one of these people. And we met with the idea that, and you know, they chose me. I was working at a rehab program, and John Allen, who was working at Peaceful. So everybody thought it was like probably a provider-consumer issue. What we discovered was it was much more than that. That there was stigma in the room of the 25 chosen ones. There was stigma all in the room for the 25 of us. And so we needed to, you know, and there was a voice that said, we got to look at this. Guess who that voice was? Can I hear it? All right, thank you. Diane's voice was, boy, we need to do something about this. So this group decided to meet at least for a year because we decided we couldn't go out and do something and go to the world and talk about stigma if we couldn't address it within our own, you know, office here. And we met for about a year. And ladies and gentlemen, this was painful. And I want to say, I'm serious, but this is really painful because what we discovered was it wasn't a provider to, you know, provider to consumer, provider to provider. You know, I got a PhD, you got a BA degree, who are you to say anything? Consumer to consumer, consumer to family. And we developed